Hello, everyone. My name is Ezra, otherwise known as eSoup. Today we are continuing Case File. I am so excited, as always. And finally, I have the Ethernet routed to my room. So we are back in my room again, and everything with the connection should be fine. Hi, Blue. Hi, Nina. Hi, Henry. So today, if I could get to the right place where it says what chapters we're reading. We're reading chapters 107 to 111. It's a bit of a longer stream today at 59 pages, so bear with me. And Wednesday's stream is going to be even longer. All of that is just because this is kind of a long volume, but I still wanted to fit it into 8 streams. So we're in for a lot this week, if you can believe it. Again. So I can't even imagine what Meat Bun has in store for us today after like everything that's happened. But we're investigating the thing with Xie Xue and how she might have gotten exposed to RN13. Perhaps at the Chung Kong Psychiatric Hospital, or perhaps through some other means, and who knows what's happening with her boyfriend and all that other good stuff. So please give the stream a like. And yeah, Blue, you suspect the boyfriend. He is suspicious. The thing about him that is the most suspicious to me is not even like, oh, he's a bad boy, so he's like doing something messed up. It's not that. It's just the fact that like we know so little about him, like relatively. I think we met him, and then we met his brother, and then he had to go away. But we really don't know very little about him, and it's like, that's, in a Meat Bun novel, that's scary. Hi, Saikin. Yes, Blue, exactly. He disappeared very conveniently. But I don't know if he's being used or if he's the one doing the bad stuff. That's the thing. There are so many different ways that it could go. Yeah, Blue, you said I kind of think he's dead, not gonna lie. It could be that too. He could be dead. Right, Henry, nothing less suspicious then. And then he had to go away. So we are on page 287 for chapter 107. I helped you investigate. The most critical thing that had happened to Xie Xue last year was that she was nearly dismembered by Jiang Lanpei. Chung Kong Psychiatric Hospital, replied He Yu. Correct. I've been constantly wondering when she could have possibly come into contact with a drug like RN13 that would cause psychological Ebola. It was a tiny dose, no less, possibly a one-off occurrence. Plus, she took a new, modified version of the drug. In the end, I thought of something Jiang Lanpei said back then. I don't know if you still remember it. That woman's crazed silhouette seemed to float before He Yu's eyes. A woman in a red dress, holding a bloody scalpel, with Liang Ji-chung's mutilated corpse at her feet, and Xie Xue's unconscious and unresponsive body in her arms. Unconscious and unresponsive. Unconscious. A spark flashed through his mind. With Xie Qingchung's reminder and his watchful gaze, He Yu remembered. She said, she made Xie Xue drink medicine. In that moment, the dead woman's voice seemed to reverberate through the room. Through this room, echoing between them. Xie Qingchung and He Yu both saw her words circling like vultures in each other's eyes, casting the shadow of memory on their bodies. The woman leered as she said, so I lied to her and got her to follow me into the office, then drugged her with the sedative in her drink when she wasn't paying attention. Of course I knew which one was the sedative. The most laughable thing about you normal people is that you look down on lunatics. I know that special sedative all too well. Whenever I was disobedient, that Liang bastard would force a whole cup of it down my throat. It was terrifying. Hold on, sorry, a thing just popped into my head. If the sedative has RN13 in it, and she was being given that, and they were giving that to other people at the psychiatric hospital too, did they just go and infect a bunch of people from the psychiatric hospital with psychological Ebola? It was terrifying. At the time, they'd assumed it was a regular sedative, especially since Xie Xue's later blood tests didn't reveal any issues. But no one had ever thought that it might be a special drug, that it might be a new kind of psychiatric medicine that had appeared in a place like that, where Liang Jicheng tested it on Zhang Lanpei. And in the end, Zhang Lanpei used it on Xie Xue. It wasn't RN13, but it had to be based on RN13. Regular tests wouldn't be able to discern its presence at all. Because of this, they'd missed their best chance to investigate. Xie Xue's condition is fine for the moment, but it's hard to say what'll happen in the future. If we want to treat her illness, we'll have to determine the chemical structure of that new drug or obtain a sample of it, Xie Qingcheng said. There's no other way. You're telling me this because you want me to help you find that sample, right? Or learn its chemical structure? Xie Qingcheng didn't reply. He fiddled with the lighter. Actually, the only reason he told He Yu was because He Yu had asked. But he also knew that with He Yu's help, he could achieve many things that would be impossible under normal circumstances. However, asking things of He Yu made him extremely uncomfortable, as it now cast a shadow in his heart. After the first time he'd asked He Yu for help at the broadcasting tower, their relationship had devolved to an unsalvageable state, never to be neatly defined again. This is an interesting choice of words. Is neatly defined. Xie Qingcheng wants their relationship to be neatly defined, because that makes things easier for him. Now that he'd so painstakingly put an end to their relationship, Xie Qingcheng couldn't foresee the consequences of playing the wild card that was He Yu. After giving it some thought, he finally looked at him. If you're unwilling, do you really take me for such a callous person? He Yu said without any visible expression on his face. Xie Qingcheng paused. That's not what I meant. He thought it over. I'm sorry. I just don't want to owe you anything. He Yu felt painfully stifled, and his expression gradually darkened. Unsure of whether he should resent himself or the other man, he finally gritted out through his teeth. Xie Qingcheng, why do you insist on keeping such a clear account of the debts between us? Xie Qingcheng replied calmly and rationally with the truth. The truth, from his perspective anyway, because we don't have a relationship. It was as if He Yu had taken a blow to the head. His vision went dark. The terrible beast in his heart was already howling. This was so absurd it was laughable. After all that they'd been through, even today, Xie Qingcheng could still say something as cutting as he had when He Yu was 14. Our relationship is merely one of employment, he'd said back then. After that relationship ends, there'll be nothing between us. Now, this man who'd slept with him so many times was saying once more, all of our rotten debts can be written off. Now, there was no relationship at all. In his silence, He Yu's eyes gradually turned a little red. That redness was stained with hateful blood, and dyed with the poison of love, filled with silent fury and dissatisfaction, all of which he slowly brought back under control. I hope you remember, Xie Qingcheng, that the two of us are kin, he said softly, his expression flat. If it has to do with RN13, it doesn't just involve you. It involves me as well. I would want to do something about this even if you didn't ask me to. With that, he abruptly rose to his feet. Despite all the time that had passed, he still wanted to be alone with Xie Qingcheng, day and night. But when he saw Xie Qingcheng in person and smelled the alluring aroma of tobacco and the crisp scent of disinfectant on him, when he saw those fine-boned hands fiddling with the lighter from only inches away, Yu kept thinking about how easily he could have held him, kissed him, clung to him, and even slept with him in the past. I love how tobacco and disinfectant went from gross smells to smells that he really likes. Now he could only listen as Xie Qingcheng spoke every word so coldly and resolutely, stabbing into his heart. The beast in his heart that had just been bestowed a name was in so much pain that it was bleeding as it howled in his chest. But all Yu could do was tell it, "Hush, you'd better shut up." Before, Xie Qingcheng had been the medicine that could calm him down. Now he'd become a poison that shattered his mind. If he let Xie Qingcheng keep tormenting him like this, he couldn't be sure that he wouldn't suddenly lose control and do something to hurt him. He paused for a moment, expression icy. "I'm leaving," he told Xie Qingcheng, without any warmth. "Wait a minute," said Xie Qingcheng. Yu turned around, still expressionless, but there was some faint anticipation in his heart. "My cigarettes," Xie Qingcheng demanded. Yu froze for a few seconds, then his black brows shot straight up in a mask of fury. Right in Xie Qingcheng's face, he took out the pack of smokes he'd just confiscated and smashed it into a pancake. Then he took a step past Xie Qingcheng and tossed it neatly into the garbage can. "Go ahead and smoke, you damn chimney. All you do is smoke. Let's see what you can smoke now." Xie Qingcheng blinked. As soon as he got home, Yu took a bunch of pills to suppress his emotions and avoid thinking about what Xie Qingcheng had said to him. Once he'd calmed down a little, he opened his laptop to review what they knew about Xie Shui's situation. At the beginning, he'd thought that investigating this matter might not be too difficult. But after sorting through a few timelines on scratch paper, he realized that Xie Qingcheng had really gotten stuck in a very challenging predicament. Almost all of the trails had gone cold. For starters, Xie Shui had been drugged at Chengkong Psychiatric Hospital. Jiang Lanpei had said she'd been given a special medicine, one that Liang Jicheng specifically used to numb her mind. The relevant information that could be gleaned from this was obvious. First, the ordinary patients of Chengkong Psychiatric Hospital probably wouldn't have come into contact with this medicine. Okay, so maybe it was tested on Jiang Lanpei, but it wasn't given to a bunch of people there? Because that was something I was wondering. I don't really know how Yu came to that conclusion, though. Second, Liang Jicheng had likely administered the drug directly. But Liang Jicheng was dead, and Chengkong Psychiatric Hospital had been reduced to scorched rubble. There were no more opportunities to find a witness or material evidence. Yu also searched for details about Chengkong Hospital, but the results were just as he expected. Liang Jicheng's wife, his son, and all of his high-ranking accomplices in Chengkong had either perished in Jiang Lanpei's inferno, or died by assassination or freak accident shortly thereafter. There was not a single living witness. Considering the circumstances, the only option was to use Liang Jicheng's connections to try to find the mastermind behind the scenes. Yu asked around in business circles, while Xie Qingcheng went to Chenman and Zheng Jingfeng for help. However, before they realized it, a month had flown by and they still didn't have any results. It was clear that their opponents didn't interact directly with Liang Jicheng. and had likely even been adamant about keeping their circles separate. There wasn't a single branch of Liang Jicheng's network that raised red flags. Until one day, He Yu caught wind of someone. A man named Sha Hong. Sha Hong was a 50-year-old labor camp inmate, currently held in Huzhou First Prison. He'd been Liang Jicheng's driver 20 years ago before getting sacked for improper conduct. After he left his job, Sha Hong got involved with the criminal organization and was later sentenced to life in prison for smuggling drugs. He Yu was very excited when he found this person. The hidden mastermind was undoubtedly an extremely careful person. They'd killed off every single high-ranking person with ties to Liang Jicheng. But from the broadcasting tower incident, it was clear that the mastermind had one extremely obvious trait: arrogance. Those kinds of arrogant eyes could usually only see targets that were high in rank and status. People like drivers, nannies, and janitors, to such eyes, they might not have even registered as people. This reminds me so much of a certain other book. But I won't say what. He Yu is different. He had the type of personality that would notice a single speck of dust. Despite being born into status, because of his illness, he'd thoroughly experienced the pain of rejection from society. He'd always believed that all people were equal. He saw this grain of sand that the hidden mastermind failed to notice. In addition, he understood very well what a driver's role entailed. Over the course of chauffeuring their boss around day by day, a driver would likely hear all kinds of things and see all kinds of people. Those things and people might not be important on their face, but if you tugged at that unimportant thread, you were very likely to unravel some important clues. He Yu pulled some strings to arrange a prison visit that very same day. Just He Yu with all his money, just like, oh, I pulled some strings and I visited this guy in prison. No big deal. Inside Huzhou First Prison, He Yu met with Sha Hong. The man's hair had already gone white, but the devious glint in his eyes was still there. He Yu spent a few minutes assessing him, and concluded that this was a person with wildness in his bones. Prison life might have restrained his body, but it hadn't captured his heart. When He Yu walked into the specially appointed visitation room, Sha Hong looked up at him, clearly not taking him very seriously. This was to be expected, as the pretense He Yu used for the visit was a screenwriting interview. In this day and age, there were many chronically jobless artists who developed a stack of pretentious airs and diva habits before ever managing the patience to produce a single work. They demand a deep dive or comprehensive interview at the drop of the hat, pretentiously calling it sacrificing myself for art, as they hassled and hurt others incessantly in a pompous, self-serving show. As if interviewing a prisoner or asking the corrections officer to let them experience a couple days in prison was some kind of colossal sacrifice. Sha Hong had clearly taken He Yu to be that kind of person. He Yu sat down across from him and drew out a smoke, passing it to him with permission of the corrections officer. Then he took one himself, fiddling with the cigarette in slender fingers as he lit it with practiced movements and took an elegant drag. How'd a little boy learn how to smoke like a grown-up? Sha Hong bared his teeth in a twisted smile. Well, he learned it from Xie Qingcheng. Oh, hi, Tina. Oh, I'm sorry you haven't been able to make it to the streams. Thank you for saying hi. Sha Hong bared his teeth in a twisted smile. He clearly looked down on He Yu. It was obvious he didn't want to cooperate for this ridiculous interview. Until He Yu lazily flicked the cigarette, His gaze flickered from the ashes to Sha Hong's face. I didn't come to interview you about your life in prison. I came to ask you some things from your time as a driver. The inmates watched the news every night at 7 o'clock, so Sha Hong wasn't ignorant of what had happened with Chung Kong. He could tell that the person in front of him was hiding something. Interview was probably just an excuse that he'd used to avoid suspicion from the jailers. Sha Hong picked up the cigarette He Yu had just passed him, borrowed the lighter, and took a long drag. For the first time, he assessed He Yu's face with full interest, though his expression remained unmoved. Each of them saw secrets in the other's eyes. In the end, Sha Hong smiled. What's there to ask about that? I'm curious, He Yu said. I want to film a program about the minds of criminals, but I don't want to feature people who turned to crime from the beginning. You went in this direction later in life, so you have a more storied past, and you're someone who's witnessed great events and notable people. I'm very interested in those influential figures you've encountered, from the smugglers of Myanmar to the drug lords of Yanzhou, to the legendary croupiers of Macau's casinos. And the very first person you worked for, Director Liang. When he mentioned Director Liang, and only Director Liang, He Yu unhurriedly rapped his knuckles against the corner of the table. Sha Hong saw this movement, but the corrections officer didn't notice anything amiss. Sha Hong was still for a moment before sneering like a sly mongrel. Oh, I get your drift. He Yu was very pleased with Sha Hong's intelligence. Not everyone would be able to pick up a code like this. But Sha Hong had spent many years smuggling and dealing drugs, relying on his quick wits to evade capture, and thus was more perceptive than the average person. What's in it for me? Sha Hong grinned, his tone heavy with implication. It's not like I'm running a news training camp over here, kid. If you want me to give you some source material, you'll have to offer me something in return. He Yu took another drag on his cigarette. Then he casually tossed away the cigarette butt, but not into the nearby ashtray. It landed outside instead. Ah, yeah, He Yu replied mildly. Look at what I've done. How did this get out here? He looked up and stared into Sha Hong's eyes. Judging by the sudden brightness in them, He Yu knew that this man had definitely understood what he meant. The man's breathing quickened. It was only the corrections officer's presence that kept him from fully expressing himself. The muscles in his face tensed. But after a moment, he forced a smile and scoffed. You're pretty impressive. It's a giant ashtray, so how do you manage to toss the cigarette outside? He Yu carefully wiped the ash from his fingertips and blandly remarked, Then he smiled. Enough about cigarettes. Why don't we get back to the topic? Mr. Shaw, would you be willing to do me a favor and give me some content and inspiration? That's the end of the chapter. We are on page 297 for chapter 108, which is called, Why is She Looking for You Again? Now, in these chapter titles, you is Xie Ching Chung. Why is she looking for you again? Can only mean Li Ruoqiu, right? I feel like she's going to have some sort of, like, further involvement in this whole mess with the organization and the conspiracies and all the stuff going on. Like, something... I don't know. Someone somewhere is going to rope her into this situation. Because you can't just have a character just, like, show up and be there and then just, like, leave and not be involved in things. Sha Hong was a very clever person. He wouldn't tell He Yu everything he knew all at once. It was very difficult for a felon serving a life sentence to trust that He Yu could get him out of prison. He wanted He Yu to show him some proof first. He Yu had anticipated this. Sha Hong wasn't some vapid idiot, so there was no reason he'd share his leads so easily. But He Yu wasn't a pushover either. Just as Sha Hong couldn't trust him, He Yu couldn't be sure that Sha Hong wasn't extorting him either. Perhaps he was just messing with him and didn't have any useful information at all. I can show you that I'm being sincere, He Yu said with a smile. But perhaps Mr. Sha should also give me some reliable material first, yes? Sha Hong bit down on his cigarette and smoked for a while. By the time the cigarette was almost finished, their allotted meeting time was nearly over as well. When the corrections officer came to take him back, Sha Hong finally stood and said to He Yu, I think the Jianglan Pei in the picture isn't the real Jianglan Pei. What do you mean by that, Mr. Sha? Sha Hong smiled mysteriously. Young man, I've seen you on the news. I know you've met Jianglan Pei in person. If you've seen her up close, think back on it. Isn't her whole face a bit stiff? Was the person he met wearing a disguise? He abruptly stopped speaking and shot He Yu a meaningful look. After putting on the heavy handcuffs and fetters under the corrections officer's supervision, he disappeared into the depths of the corridor. Sha Hong had been behind bars at the time, but he had accurately described Jianglan Pei's face, at least from He Yu's interaction with her. He Yu was an extremely meticulous person in some respects. At the time, he had indeed noticed that there were some problems with Jianglan Pei's facial muscles. It seemed like her range of expression was limited. He hadn't been able to observe or investigate much in the midst of that perilous situation, but upon hearing Sha Hong's words, He Yu was sure that he wasn't lying. This man really did have information that was worth the risk to dig up. Thus, 1 week later, Sha Hong's labor-intensive prison factory job moving scrap metal came to an end, and he was transferred to a new post sewing buttons onto bedsheets for the export market. A few days after that, he was relieved from the button sewing job and allowed to serve food in the cafeteria. Now this was a felon's dream job. Not only was it leisurely and untaxing, but it also gave him the opportunity to take the biggest pieces of fish and meat every day. The other inmates scrambled to suck up to Sha Hong in hopes that he would serve them the best options at the counter. The days passed like that for a while, until the prison's medical examinations drew near. A few weeks before the day of the exams, one of Sha Hong's fellow inmates furtively passed him a slip of paper sealed with wax. A row of simple words was written on it. If you trust me, I'll ask you some specific things this weekend. If you give me the information I request, your medical results will meet the criteria for compassionate release. Oh, so if he has, like, certain kinds of illness, they would say, like, oh, you're really sick. We'll let you out early. Okay. I see. I still don't know how he's pulling it off, but I was seriously like, I have no idea how He Yu is going to pull off getting someone out of prison. The signature was very simple. Just the character, He. With that, Sha Hong accepted He Yu's second interview. Yeah, Blue, you said human face mask in my barely sci-fi or surgery. And Henry, the evil Botox of disguise. Yeah, I wonder. I'm leaning towards mask. But I have seen stories, like, where, like, someone gets plastic surgery to disguise their face. But I'm wondering if there's some kind of, especially some sort of, like, fancy technology, sci-fi, like, human face mask. They scheduled their meeting for 7 o'clock in the evening. On the day before, Sha Hong sat down at a small table in the prison and wrote a very succinct outline of the things he planned to tell He Yu about tomorrow. He knew this meeting would be very important for him. He needed to give He Yu some valuable information to make sure he was satisfied. But he also didn't plan to give a complete account of the most important matters all at once, so that He Yu wouldn't be able to renege on his promise to grant him medical release after he finished using him. Sha Hong scrawled some words on the paper, repeatedly cutting out information until he was finally satisfied. Tucking the paper near his chest, he climbed into bed with the sound of the lights-out whistle and went to sleep. Oh no, Blue, you said, oh, he's so gonna die. Oh no, if he dies before their conversation... Oh god. Okay. Sha Hong... Wait, I read that. Excuse me. Perhaps it was because the end of his imprisonment was right before his eyes. Or because he had spent so long thinking about the events of the past, right before sleeping. But that night, as he lay on the hard plank bed that he'd slept in for more than a decade, Sha Hong had a dream. After we take care of this business, both of us brothers will have made it. In the dream, Liang Jicheng looked the same as he did 20 or so years ago. He and Liang Zhongkang walked out of a luxurious restaurant on the Bund, arm in arm, both brothers only half awake in a drunken stupor. Those other guys sure are big shots. Fuck, once the contract was signed, they transferred all that foreign currency straight into our Swiss account without even blinking. Guh, I've never seen so much money in my life. Don't even mention helping them hide people or equipment, even if it were... Before finishing the sentence, Liang Jicheng shut his mouth smugly. His drowsy gaze had landed on Sha Hong. The younger Liang Laoban hiccuped tipsily, caught his elder brother's eye, and grinned. They clearly both understood that they shouldn't speak too much of these under-the-table dealings in front of their driver. Executive Liang, Junior Executive Liang, please let me help you into the car. Liang Jicheng disdainfully waved his hand away. What are you doing? Watch it. Do you have any idea what I'm wearing? Gucci. 90,000 a pop. I haven't even cut the tag off yet. If you get it dirty, are you going to pay for it? A 90,000 yuan Gucci wool overcoat was still ordinary ready to wear, and not haute couture, but it was extremely luxurious for the Liang brothers back then. Their private psychiatric hospital wasn't profitable at the time. More than once, it had almost gone bankrupt. But Liang Zhongkang guffawed, clapping his brother on the shoulder. What's the big deal? In the future, we'll be protected under the shade of a big tree. Each of their celebrities' evening gowns is worth over a fucking million. What's 90,000 when we're working for them? You're right, Ge. I drink too much. From now on, 90,000's not even enough to clean my teeth. Hey, careful, what are you doing? The tipsy man accidentally tripped over himself as Sha Hong helped him into the car, but in his confusion he blamed it on Sha Hong. He raised his hand and slapped Sha Hong across the face. Blue, get your paws off the big tree. Watch where you're going. This is what you call service? You can't even support your master properly. See if I don't just fire you. What are you hitting him for? He's from the countryside and he reeks of salted fish. You'll have to get an alcohol wipe from the car and disinfect yourself now that you've touched him. The elder brother's words cut even deeper than the younger ones. Liang Zhongkang let out a wild laugh, looking over at Sha Hong in an immensely self-satisfied manner. There's a fucking social order of the rich and the poor. Some people can command thousands, millions, with a wave of their hand, while other people... Ha! Sha Hong was so incensed that he released the hand he was using to support the brothers. All people should be considered equal. Do you think you can slander my character just because you're my boss? Equal? This is Huzhou. Do you know what Huzhou was like 100 years ago? On this side of the river, it was a prospering city of riches, while on the other side, people were starving and dying. If you and I were here a century ago, you'd be a rickshaw driver, and if I wanted to beat you to death, I'd go ahead and do it. Don't talk to me about equality. Xia Hong was about to argue back when Liang Zhongkong took out a fat wallet from inside his jacket. Pulling out a pile of big 100 yuan notes, he slapped the bills against Xia Hong's stiff face. Stop being so idealistic, young man. You want to talk about equality with us? Let me show you what equality is. I heard your mother's ill and that you're desperate for money. I hit you. So here's 1,000. I've got plenty of money now. You want it? Huh? Do you want it? Those stinking, sordid, incomparably seductive bills landed harshly against his tense cheek. The thin notes seemed to weigh a ton, heavy enough to break his bones, to smash his face into a gory mess. Xia Hong remembered that when the wind blew on the Bund back then, those flimsy 100 yuan notes fluttered through the sky, causing a frenzied scramble among the late night crowd returning home. He'd stood in the cold wind, but he couldn't recall whether he himself chased after that scattered money, kneeling and sobbing. It was very strange. His memory was usually excellent, but he just couldn't remember. Perhaps even the memory was ashamed of itself. When a person couldn't help falling to the level of a beast, the human brain was too embarrassed to acknowledge such absurd events. Xia Hong only remembered the faces of the two Liang clan brothers, despicably self-satisfied, full of brash, vicious laughter. And the sound of that laughter, spinning up like a deranged maelstrom in his memories. He very clearly remembered the date and address, as well as the brothers' anxious, unsettled expressions before they drove to the arranged meeting spot, and the handful of names that they'd said softly in the car. Xia Hong had been a driver, but he was also a human being. He had silently remembered those names. Those names were very likely to satisfy He Yu. Yeah, Henry, you said memory fucker, but memory fuckery, not memory fucker. I'm sorry, I cannot speak today. Yeah, it does seem like that. It does seem like something is going on here. Because it's like, why is that one thing that you can't remember? Why does it happen to be... Like, I don't know, it's when Meat Bun points that out and you're like, yeah, I don't know. On Sunday morning, He Yu got up very early and drove to Moyu Alley. He was going to see Xia Hong today, and after giving it some thought, he decided to tell Xie Qingcheng about it. Here we go. But before he even got out of the car, he saw Li Ruoqiu walk out of the alley with Xie Qingcheng at her side. Since that awkward run-in on New Year's Eve, Li Ruoqiu hadn't appeared for a while. He couldn't imagine why she had come back here today. He Yu found this woman truly bizarre. She and Xie Qingcheng were divorced, so why was she still clinging to him? How did she have the guts to use the man he liked as her rebound? Well, He Yu, she doesn't know that part, but yeah. You should go back. You don't need to send me off. I'll call a cab. I've already called one for you. Then, reaching into her luxury handbag, Li Ruoqiu took out a rather thick envelope that clearly held a considerable sum of money and handed it to Xie Qingcheng. Then you should take this. Xiao Shui was always so good to me, and now that she's suddenly fallen ill, I can't do much else to help, so you should keep this money. No matter what, she's still my little sister-in-law, Li Ruoqiu replied. Not anymore. Xiege, you should go home. I'm very thankful that you care about her, but we can't take this money. The woman looked up in a daze, stared at him for a while, and then said, Ge, please don't take it the wrong way. That's not what I meant. It's just that I've been through some things, and there's a lot more that I understand now. I know I spent a lot of your money before, and I don't know how to repay you for all that you did for me, so I... Xie Qingcheng cut her off. Back then, you were my wife. There were also many things that you considered on my behalf. His eyes were very calm, like two distant pools. It was my duty. Li Ruoqiu stared at him, looking as if she were about to cry again. Xiege, I've decided to divorce him, she blurted out to him out of nowhere. She searched for any hint of a reaction on Xie Qingcheng's face, only to be thoroughly disappointed. Vines of sobs twined over Li Ruoqiu's voice. You know that I'm the type of person who can't bear being unloved. When I divorced you, it was because you always seemed so cold and icy, and I wanted some warmth when we were alone together. The way you reciprocated was so mechanical, too, without much desire. Did you know how resentful I felt back then? Xie Qingcheng didn't answer. It was like your whole life was on a schedule. You planned everything out so precisely. I tried so hard to dig out something gentle, something passionate from your heart. But I couldn't. You took care of me and protected me. You gave me a home. But it never seemed like you treated me as your wife. You didn't like it when I cooked for you or did your laundry. You didn't want me to do too much for you. But I think that love should be reciprocal. The more you acted that way, the more uneasy I was. I felt like I'd always owe you if we continued on like that. Xie Qingcheng sighed. I've already said that you made many sacrifices and concessions for my choices as well. And back then, you were my wife. Those were all my duties. But back then, you were my husband, too. Why couldn't you let me take care of you, too? Xie Qingcheng was rendered speechless. Yeah, Blue, you will remember this. The passion thing specifically. I also do think, as much as we might not want to think about that, there is like a slight... I don't know if it's a parallel between Li Ruoqiu and He Yu, but like some of the stuff Li Ruoqiu is saying is not that different from like the current situation He Yu is in, where he's like, I want warmth from you, Xie Qingcheng. Like, that's what he wants, is warmth from him. It's like, they're in a totally different situation, but it just made me think about that. Yeah. Li Ruoqiu gazed at him through reddened eyes. Ge, you let others receive your care and guidance, but you never accept any of their good intentions. When we were married, you almost drove me crazy. I never imagined that someone's goodness could become the boulder that crushes another person's heart. I want love so badly. I want someone to love me back equally, and to let me take care of him and protect him in return. I'm willing to do anything for it, no matter if it's right or wrong. When I found someone like that, I thought I'd found true love, but how could I have known? She chuckled bitterly, lowered her head, and dabbed at her tears. Right now, I feel so lost, Xiege. Maybe I idealized love too much. Or maybe a love without responsibility is just an affair that leaves an impression, regardless of the marriage certificate. Nothing more. Xie Qingcheng still remained silent. Li Ruoqiu finished wiping her tears and looked up at him. Can you accept this money? Even if you have to see it as a last act of comfort for me? Or even forgiveness? I'm sorry. In the end, Xie Qingcheng still refused. I can't. As if she'd expected that outcome, Li Ruoqiu only smiled softly. But as she smiled through her tears, it was clear that she was still crying. The cab Xie Qingcheng had called for her arrived. Just as before, he opened the door for her out of habit, his manner very paternalistic and considerate. His peach blossom eyes met her tearful ones. Please get in. Thank you for coming here to ask after her condition. He didn't finish what remained of his sentence, because Li Ruoqiu couldn't hold back the complicated emotions in her heart, or suppress her sorrow any longer. In the crisp chill of the morning wind, she suddenly reached out and wrapped her arms around his waist. Her shoulders shook, her tears finally falling like rain. Shiega, I'm sorry. Sorry. Could you hold me? Just one last time. I'm so, so sorry. I... Xie Qingcheng couldn't get angry with a woman, especially when crying so brokenly. Although Li Ruoqiu had cheated on him, she'd also done something that he was extremely grateful for. That was something he would always remember, now and forever. Xie Qingcheng didn't know what to do, seeing her in this state. He could only say, Li Ruoqiu, calm down. This is very inappropriate. The car is here. You should get in. But Li Ruoqiu refused to let go. She had suffered too many grievances. In that moment, as she clung to him, she wished from the bottom of her heart that none of it had happened, that she was still his wife, that she could embrace her husband without reservations, to her heart's content. She had no idea that nearby, He Yu was gripping his steering wheel, gazing at them through the windshield. And as she wrapped her arms around Xie Qingcheng's waist, clinging to him as she cried out her troubles, every detail of the scene was reflected in that youth's dark pupils. Blue, you're so right. He saw, but he couldn't have heard their conversation. Oh, great. Oh, cool. Oh, awesome. Beautiful. Now, yeah, no, there's no way He Yu is gonna have the logical thought that, like, Xie Qingcheng is obviously not interested in Li Ruoqiu. He's gonna jump to the worst conclusions, right? But that's the end of the chapter, so I guess we're going to find out here on page 307 for chapter 109, which is called I Let You Tempt Me. In that moment, He Yu felt simply murderous. He glowered at that woman, watching her embrace Xie Qingcheng, the man he couldn't even touch. He felt bewildered and wronged. She'd hurt Xie Qingcheng too, so why was she allowed to hold him and cling to him, whereas he could only watch him from afar, to be reprimanded and cursed out as soon as he drew closer? Partly because of the whole chauvinistic thing where Xie Qingcheng is like, I can't get mad at a woman. But He Yu could answer this question for himself. It was because he was a man. Because he was also a psychological Ebola patient. Because he'd given Xie Qingcheng his word that he wouldn't force him or hurt him anymore. Because he was the only one who knew of Xie Qingcheng's secrets. He knew of all the suffering that Xie Qingcheng had gone through. So he couldn't. But all the same, when he saw Li Ruoqiu throw her arms around Xie Qingcheng, hatred overwhelmed him with such force that he wanted to snap the steering wheel in half. In that instant, his rationality eroded. He longed to get out of the car and shove Li Ruoqiu away, and then frantically kissed Xie Qingcheng right in front of her. He wanted to unheedingly drag Xie Qingcheng back into Moyu Alley, to undress him halfway, and start fucking him right there. He didn't even care if Li Ruoqiu saw. He even wanted her to see. As though going mad, he wanted this woman who saw Xie Qingcheng as her rebound to know that Xie Qingcheng wasn't a man no one else wanted. He's not your Shiega anymore. He's my Shiega. I've kissed him and fucked him on your nuptial bed. I let him know the taste of pleasure as he panted hard beneath me, so turned on that he convulsed and trembled and cried out. I know that he never experienced that kind of ecstasy when he was with you. He got on top of me and moved his hips. He bent down and kissed me fiercely, but you never had that. You don't have anything at all. He Yu's thoughts roiled like thunder. He ignored the fact that he had tempted Xie Qingcheng that night, and even further ignored Xie Qingcheng's self-destructive despair and heartbreak. He turned a blind eye and a deaf ear to the reason Xie Qingcheng had gone to bed with him in a fit of madness on New Year's Eve. He only wanted to provoke Li Ruoqiu. He only wanted to show this clueless woman, "The man you didn't want is the man I love. You're not allowed to touch him. I love him so much, but I don't even touch him. Just who do you think you are? Who do you think you are to hug him, to cling to him? Who do you think you are, someone he won't curse out?" The more He Yu thought about this, the more furious and aggrieved he became, his emotions muddying his reason. By the time he came back to his senses, he had already gotten out of the car and walked over to the two of them. Great. As soon as Xie Qingcheng saw him, his expression shifted. This feeling of being treated and appraised differently made He Yu feel even worse. He glared at Xie Qingcheng in silent reproach. Xie Qingcheng looked away. Li Ruoqiu hadn't expected this boy to suddenly come out of the car at the street corner and appear before them as if he dropped from the sky. The shock pulled her out of her grief. Realizing that something wasn't right, she let go of Xie Qingcheng. She quickly composed herself and turned to He Yu with a forced smile. What a coincidence. What a coincidence, indeed, He Yu said softly. For some reason, Li Ruoqiu shivered. As they stood there at the Longtong entrance, the atmosphere between them was bizarre. The driver couldn't take it anymore. He stuck his head out of the car. "Hey, what are you guys doing? Are you going to leave or not?" Li Ruoqiu said, "No." Xie Qingcheng replied, "Yes." He signaled for Li Ruoqiu to get in. Although the woman was very hesitant, in the end, she couldn't get out a single word of opposition in the face of Xie Qingcheng's insistence, just like always. He steered her into the car in a manner that brooked no resistance, and all she dared to do was roll down the window and give him a halting goodbye. "Xiege, you should look after yourself. If there's anything you ever need help with, I can." He Yu had already walked over, looking down at her with his expressionless face. Even though he was clearly still a youth, his aura was even more overbearing than Xie Qingcheng's. Li Ruoqiu trailed off, unable to finish her sentence. The window rolled back as the taxi started. The window rolled back up as the taxi started, cutting off the young man's gloomy gaze from the woman's bewildered eyes. As soon as Li Ruoqiu was gone, He Yu pulled Xie Qingcheng into an empty alleyway nearby. Oh dear. There were many small lanes like this in Huzhou's old city district. Many Western-style houses had been built in this area when it was occupied by the British a century ago, and the houses were packed close together in a way that created a number of narrow alleys only wide enough for 2 or 3 people to pass through. He Yu immediately threw Xie Qingcheng against the patchy wall, pinning him there. His mindset wasn't normal. His domineering nature was bone deep, and the jealousy had gone to his head, so he lost control of his strength. When he slammed Xie Qingcheng's back against the wall, Xie Qingcheng knitted his brows and let out a low groan, caught off guard by the pain. That sound was throaty and alluring, yet also tinged with fragility. He Yu couldn't help but remember those times at the club, in the dressing room, and on New Year's Eve, when he tormented Xie Qingcheng to the point that he could no longer hold back those hoarse cries. He Yu's heart blazed with warmth. He pulled Xie Qingcheng close, reaching out to rub the painful point of impact. "Xie Qingcheng," he murmured gently to him. "It's okay. Let me rub it for you. I'll make the pain go away." "Let go of me." Xie Qingcheng drew his sword-straight brows together, gritting his teeth as he grabbed He Yu's hand. "Let go. You—" Xie Qingcheng stopped in the middle of his sentence. Because as He Yu held him, their hips pressed together. He Yu dipped his head down, lashes quivering as they rose. He buried his nose under Xie Qingcheng's chin to inhale deeply. Xie Qingcheng had been too busy for meticulous self-care these past few days. There was a pale shadow of stubble that was only evident at such close proximity, and He Yu could even smell the distinctive scent in the hollow of the man's neck. It was a scent unique to this man's body, a blend of bracing tobacco and icy disinfectant, with base notes of a grown man's musk. It was like Pandora's box had bewitched He Yu. He looked up and silently met Xie Qingchung's eyes again. He moved as if hypnotized. He couldn't help but press closer to this irresistibly alluring man. Xie Qingchung. He Yu braced his arm against the wall next to him, his face inching forward as his eyes flitted between Xie Qingchung's nose and his lips. Finally, he closed the distance between them until their jaws brushed lightly against each other, the tips of their noses practically touching. He looked at him so intently, like Xie Qingchung's lips exerted a magnetic force. Henry. not the Pandora's box of his armpit sweat. Oh, you, I love your kinks. He looked at him so intently, like Xie Qingchung's lips exerted a magnetic force. In that moment, the flames of envy and fury consumed He Yu, making it impossible for him to control his desire to kiss him, to mindlessly entangle with him right here. Until Xie Qingchung reached up to slowly press a slightly cool fingertip to He Yu's warm lips. Remember what you promised, He Yu. Tall, well-built Xie Qingchung came back to his senses as he watched the other man. His voice shook almost imperceptibly out of fear that He Yu would start going at it with him in this neighborhood alley. However, he still strove to maintain his usual calm. Let go of me, he said in a low voice. Don't do something that makes me look down on you. He Yu fell silent, like he'd been roused from a trance, as though the dream had ended. His eyes were still agitated, but Xie Qingchung's words had undoubtedly pricked him. Blue, sometimes I forget that Meatbone is in fact a woman of taste. He straightened up, the fog dissipating, his pupils refocusing. After standing there frozen for several long seconds, he slowly pulled away from Xie Qingchung. Every single inch of him wanted to kiss him, to frantically and ardently possess him. He wanted to melt into surging waters, to plunge into squalid dirt, to go up in scorching flames with him, here in this narrow alley. He longed for him so deeply that he wanted to tear him to shreds. But He Yu stopped cold. Medusa's gaze had cast a demonic spell over him. As the demon dragon's scarlet eyes stared at his frail yet formidable kin, he finally stopped himself from clawing at his inverted scale. And there is a footnote. In Chinese mythology, dragons possess an inverted scale on their throats. The scale must not be touched, or else the dragon will kill the offender. The inverted scale is also used as a metaphor for a sore spot or weakness that can provoke strong negative reactions. That's interesting, too, because isn't Xie Qingchung's, like, sensitive spot, his weak spot, his neck? He really is a dragon, too. You misunderstand, He Yu said softly, trying to cover his embarrassment. I wasn't planning to kiss you. I just wanted to smell whatever the debauched scent on your body is that's so irresistible to others. Could the first Emperor's special ability from psychological Ebola be seduction? The first Emperor is unique among psychological Ebola patients. I don't have a special ability. I bet he does have a special ability. He just doesn't know it yet. Or if he knows about it, he's just not telling anybody about it yet. But he's gotta have something. I don't know what it could be, but he's gotta have something. Xie Qingchung pulled himself together and continued with a grim expression. Besides, Li Ruoqiu only came to see what was going on because she contacted Xie Shui, but Xie Shui never replied. Get your mind out of the gutter. Stop speaking nonsense and dragging a girl's innocent name through the mud. What innocent girl? She's already been married, so how is she still a girl? I'm telling you, Xie Qingcheng. That woman came here to get back together with you. The way she hugged and teased you, and the look in her eyes when she watched you weren't the least bit innocent. Then what kind of look would you call innocent? I'm going to hit He Yu right now. He Yu gave it some thought. The way I look at you, he said. I can't. What? Like, what? No. Xie Qingcheng actually stared into his eyes for a while. As two pairs of eyes met, that strange beast in the depths of He Yu's heart started howling in dissatisfaction, wanting to sink its teeth into Xie Qingcheng and drag him beneath a canopy of crimson gauze. It urged him to turn Xie Qingcheng into bleached bones in its cave, never to vanish or leave. To gnaw away at him until he was stripped clean of flesh. Xie Qingcheng pushed He Yu's head away. Don't stand so close to me. Why didn't you talk to her like that when she hugged you? He Yu asked morosely. Because she's a woman. Haven't you heard of gender equality? Why do you need to discriminate against men? And this is in his head. Discriminate my ass. And then he says, she's my ex-wife. I'm your ex-hookup. Not ex-hookup. Xie Qingcheng didn't deign to reply. Xie Qingcheng, you aren't taking any responsibility. You're treating me like this just because I can't get pregnant. Because I'm a man. Because we don't have a marriage certificate. Xie Qingcheng was frowning. He Yu's words were utterly unhinged. Totally illogical. What was all this talk about pregnancy, certificates, and responsibility? He Yu had distorted things to the point that Xie Qingcheng even had the vague misconception that he was the one who had seduced and dumped He Yu. Well, He Yu seduced you, and you dumped him, essentially. But, yeah. But hadn't He Yu been the one who initiated the physical relationship between them? And the conversation had swung back to the topic of their previous argument. If someone had gotten pregnant at any point from the things they'd done in bed, would that person have been He Yu? What kind of underhanded sophistry was this? Say something. He Yu looked at him, leaning back against the wall. Why aren't you saying anything? I have nothing to say to you. Xie Qingcheng was a full-grown man in his 30s, after all. Was he really going to pull a long face and debate the specifics of who got the worst end of the deal with He Yu? As a straight-laced, chronic chauvinist, he couldn't do it. If He Yu thought he was the one who was shameless, irresponsible, and unreasonable, then so be it. At any rate, acted like scum toward a 19-year-old boy sounded more respectable than got fucked by a 19-year-old boy. So it was obviously a bit easier for Xie Qingcheng to accept. Xie Qingcheng actually turned around and began walking away, just like a scumbag who'd knocked up a co-ed. But halfway out of the alley, college girl He Yu grabbed his wrist, fingers closing around his tattoo. Frankly, it had been quite a while since the two of them last touched. When He Yu's palm met Xie Qingcheng's wrist, a shiver ran through them both. However, while Xie Qingcheng tensed up from head to toe with a desire to throw off He Yu's hand, He Yu felt an electric tingle rush down his spine, and a wish to pull Xie Qingcheng into his arms. Xie Qingcheng turned around impassively. Let go. Now, I hope He Yu actually gets the chance to tell Xie Qingcheng what he initially came here intending to tell him. Let's hope we don't get completely derailed. He Yu gritted his teeth, summoning all his willpower to hold back the impulse to scoop Xie Qingcheng up and pin him against the alley wall, to kiss his lashes, his lips, the mole at the nape of his neck. He calmed himself down with effort, even managing to squeeze out a very unsightly smile. Do you really think I want you that bad? Xie Qingcheng, with my position and status, you know that I can get anyone I want, right? Men and women are all chasing after me. Why would I need you? Why would I only be with you? I'm just toying with you. It's a joke. Don't take it so seriously. Xie Qingcheng yanked his wrist out of He Yu's grip and fixed the cuff of his sleeve. He looked up at him. Very good. I really admire your self-confidence. But I don't think your joke is very funny. I think Xie Qingcheng knows that that's not true. With that, he made to leave again. He Yu didn't touch him again this time. He could still feel the warmth Xie Qingcheng had left behind on his palm, and the delicate smoothness of the skin on his wrist. He savored these sensations in his hand, feeding them to the injured, bleeding beast in his heart. He didn't want Xie Qingcheng to leave just like that, so he had to stop making a scene. Thank you. He leaned back against the wall, suppressing the flames in his heart. Don't leave yet, he said. There's actually some important business that I wanted to talk to you about today. Xie Qingcheng stopped in his tracks. He turned back to look at He Yu's face, his figure illuminated by a narrow beam of light coming through the gap between the tall buildings. It threw the brightness and shadow on Xie Qingcheng's figure into sharp relief, but as he gazed at He Yu with the light at his back, He Yu couldn't make out his expression. Interesting. I really do have some actual business to discuss, He Yu added, wiping the devil-may-care expression off of his face. I found someone who might be able to give us a lead to follow tonight. Do you want to come with me to see him? He's inviting him to go with him to the meeting. I wasn't expecting that. I thought he was just going to be like, by the way, I'm talking to this prisoner. Let me tell you what I found out so far. I'm going to do it again today. Why is... Okay. I had a random notification on my computer that would not go away. I dealt with that. There's a scene break. I'm so scared that something is going to happen to Sha Hong before they can talk. Inside Huzhou First Prison, Sha Hong was preparing dinner in the cafeteria. A corrections officer had arranged his interview with He Yu for after the meal. When Sha Hong had been a drug dealer, his higher-ups would always carefully appraise the quality of their wares, sorting them by grade from A+ all the way down. As a result, Sha Hong had acquired a similar habit, and had already clearly sorted and graded the intelligence he was about to hawk to He Yu. Although he'd spent recent years stuck in prison, he'd managed to keep track of what was happening on the outside through watching TV, talking to newly arrived inmates, and listening to the corrections officers' conversations. There were several particularly important people on his list of names. Those people were the same as many capitalists. In public, they spouted mouthfuls of grand ideals, but in private, they were filthier than the sewage under a manhole cover. Meat bun, I love you. The Liang brothers were dead, but those other people were still thriving in society as celebrities, high flyers, and model citizens. Sha Hong scoffed as he chopped vegetables. The people who'd slapped bills against his face on the Bund might have forgotten about his existence long ago. What did a driver matter to them? They couldn't even remember his name. Perhaps they felt it was beneath them to remember it. But even a nobody could play a part in toppling the most formidable establishment. Sooner or later, retribution would come. He glanced up at the clock. It was almost time. He didn't have a moment to waste. He put the chopped vegetables and meat into a pan and began stir-frying. Surrounded by the aroma of simple cooking, eyes that had just flashed with hate gradually grew wet. Cooking reminded him of his mother. Liang Jicheng had humiliated him, then dismissed him. The reason he gave for his dismissal was especially revolting. He said Sha Hong was a light-fingered crook who had stolen his employer's money. Between Executive Liang and a random driver, whose word carried more weight? Who would everyone believe? His reputation was hopelessly tarnished, and he couldn't find suitable work anywhere. His mother was gravely ill and needed money for treatment, but he didn't even have enough to make ends meet. How could he possibly afford the sky-high price of medicine? He'd applied for jobs everywhere, only to be rejected over and over again. Finally, a friend of his who claimed he could make a fortune with a little bit of risk found him and suggested they sell cough syrup together. He wanted to save his mother, but he was slowly led astray by how easily this money flowed in. It changed him as a person, and in the end, the vast net of justice descended, catching him in its clutches. A few months later, in prison, he learned of his mother's death. In that moment, he fell to his knees and bawled his heart out to the corrections officer. But the officer told him there was no way they could let him out to send his mother off on her final journey. I want to remind you, this is a drug offender. He didn't murder anyone or anything like that. To this day, he'd never gone to that public cemetery to retrieve his mother's ashes from the storage warehouse. As Sha Hong cooked, he recalled how, when he was little, his mother ran an illegal street food cart all by herself, dodging the local law enforcement and serving food right under their noses. One bowl of congee or rice noodles at a time, through bitter toil, she scraped together enough spare change to raise him. He'd gotten through his childhood nourished by humble yet warm dishes that smelled just like this. He reached up to wipe away his tears. Amid the rising tendrils of steam, he murmured softly, "Mom, I'm coming to bring you home." 22104, hurry up and get ready. Your visitation time is almost here. An officer by the kitchen door called out to him. Sha Hong assented and started stir-frying faster. The liquid in the pan was almost cooked off. Seasoning with dark soy sauce was the last step. Sparks flew around the iron wok. As Sha Hong unscrewed the cap to pour the soy sauce, he paused in confusion. Why was the soy sauce clear? And why did it smell like alcohol? No, no! A thunderous boom. Oh, sorry. I skipped a line. Great, great, great. That ended up being his final thought. A thunderous boom rang out. The alarms began to wail. Help! Fire! Save us! Put out the fire! Everything's on fire! Everything is always on fire. The flames leapt up instantaneously as a massive explosion roared to life in the kitchen, ear-splitting sirens piercing the furious inferno. Sha Hong didn't even get a chance to scream before he was sucked into the towering flames, swallowed up in the blink of an eye. That's the end of the chapter. Case file, compendium, everything is on fire. Yep. That's the end of the chapter. I am overdue for a break. Yeah, so someone somehow switched out the soy sauce with alcohol and, ignited things. So that's fun. All right. Well, I'm going to take a break. When we come back, we will be on chapter 110, which is called I Wanted to Kiss You So Badly. And then they're going to find out that everything is on fire again. Oh, Blue, that's a good point. On the bright side, this will make Hoyu know that he was being way too conspicuous and he needs to wise up if he wants to beat these guys. Yeah. Yeah. Alright, well, like I said, I will see y'all back again in about 10 minutes. We will find out what the heck is going on. Hopefully. Yeah. Hello, I am back. I have returned. I added a few quotes to the quote slideshow thing. I still, there's like a big gap in like I don't have very much from volume 3, and I don't have very much from the beginning of volume 4, but I just like went through and like grabbed a few extra things to put in there. I guess I'll end up updating it basically at the end or after we finish this volume, and then I'll have like an updated version by the time we get back around to case file again after QJJ. So look forward to that in like 4.5 months. Blue, you were saying something during the break that I thought was interesting. You said, what if the old woman in the wheelchair is the OG victim in that sanatorium? I forgot her name too, especially because her name is really similar to a woman from the organization. For some reason, I get their names mixed up. But you're saying, what if that's the real patient and the person who said she was her was in disguise? Yeah, that would make sense. You said, I remember that she was supposed to be in her 50s at least. That for a psychological Ebola patient is ancient. Yeah. No, that would be interesting. Yeah, Jiang Li Ping versus Jiang Lan Pei. That's why I get confused. I don't remember which is which. Is Li Ping the patient from the hospital? Maybe? Oh, Blue, you said the old woman hates men. That's right. You're correct. That would make sense. So if somehow she escaped and someone else posed as her. Interesting. Oh, Henry, you think Lan Pei is the patient. Okay. I will have to confirm that at some point. So I always get them mixed up. So, we are on page 319 for chapter 110. I wanted to kiss you so badly. Xie Qingcheng and He Yu sat in the car in silence. Before they arrived at the prison, their hearts had been full of hope. They'd never expected things to turn out this way. Sha Hong was only targeted recently, He Yu told Xie Qingcheng with a somber expression, his hands folded on the steering wheel. Nothing like this ever happened when I came to see him before. Someone's following me. Xie Qingcheng leaned back in the passenger seat, watching the nighttime scenery outside. It seemed like the darkness would never lift. I knew there was a good chance that they'd follow me, so I was very careful. I even said I was visiting Sha Hong for a screenwriting interview. I kept urging the prison guards to move my second visit time forward, but... It's no use, Xie Qingcheng said. They just needed one glance at Sha Hong's past to realize he'd slipped past their net. You stood out too much during the broadcasting tower incident, so they'd definitely be watching closely. I think you should have told me about this earlier. I didn't want to pull you into this from the beginning, He Yu snapped in irritation. Reaching for a cigarette, Xie Qingcheng's hand stopped in midair. For some reason, he looked at He Yu. Because that indicates that He Yu cares about him and not dragging him into things that might be dangerous. He Yu knew that his tongue had slipped. He coughed. I thought you dragged me down, he said with a grave expression. And can you stop smoking? Xie Qingcheng peered into the box, saw that there was only one cigarette left, and decided to let it go. He put the box back into his pocket, rubbed his forehead with his hand, and let out a weary sigh instead of retorting. How's Xie Xue doing these days? He Yu asked. Her fever comes and goes, but it never disappears for long. Xie Qingcheng closed his eyes and leaned his head back, sighing. There aren't any serious problems right now, but it'll be troublesome if it continues this way. He was silent for a moment, stealing a glance at Yu behind his long, downcast eyelashes. I didn't think you still cared about Xiaoshui so much. I didn't think you'd want to interact with her after you argued. Truth be told, Yu didn't intend to interact much with Xiaoshui anymore. But in the end, she was still an old friend. And even more importantly, she was Xie Qingcheng's younger sister. Even if this had nothing to do with RN13, he wouldn't just leave it alone. So after a silence, he said, Of course I care about her. I've known her for years. Xie Qingcheng glanced at him. There was a hint of surprise in his eyes. But Yu didn't notice. To lighten up the suddenly gloomy mood, he swiped at the dashboard screen to put on some music. To his surprise, the first song was the same one he'd been playing on repeat recently. My Heart Will Go On. To his surprise. Oh. Blue, you said, no, I read that right. Xie Qingcheng stopped because he remembered that Yu hates the smell of secondhand smoke. It's so funny how Yu has picked up occasionally smoking, although he seems to do it strategically for the most part, but sometimes it's because it, like, gives him, like, a connection to Xie Qingcheng. But yeah, I guess Xie Qingcheng was actually being nice to him about that. Every night in my dreams, I see you, I feel you. This song instantly transported both of them back into the bone-chilling, deadly flooded film studio, and the atmosphere suddenly turned strange and uncomfortable. As he listened to the song, Yu's thoughts gradually shifted away from the anxiety-riddled matter of Sha Hong. Xie Qingcheng let the music fill the silence for a long moment. Then he spoke. Don't blame yourself too much for what happened with Sha Hong. Sometimes things are just out of our control. As for Xiaoshui, it seems like she's still very important to you. Thank you for being so committed to helping her. Yu said nothing. Xie Qingcheng's tone warmed up somewhat as he tried to console him. She's in a very reliable hospital, so you don't need to worry about her for now. You know, whenever I read the song lyrics, I want to sing them, but y'all don't need to hear my singing voice, so I don't. Yu listened to his words of consolation in silence, but in his heart, he felt miserable. Why couldn't Xie Qingcheng understand his heart? Why couldn't Xie Qingcheng understand that everything he had done, his reluctance to let her go, it didn't really have anything to do with Xiaoshui. It was all because of her brother. My heart will go on. My heart will go on. His thoughts were in chaos. He suddenly yearned to turn to Xie Qingcheng and kiss him, to tell him everything. But he couldn't. Just like Jack, just like the heart of the ocean, his heart was doomed to sink. As those impulses reared up within him again, he kicked the inside of the car and swore under his breath. Frankly, what Yu really wanted was to pin Xie Qingcheng down on the passenger seat, pull off his clothes, and start fervently fucking him right there in the car. But in the end, he just irritably grabbed a handful of his own bangs and turned his ashen face away. In the interest of airing out his gloominess, he decided to open the window. The early spring weather was still fickle, alternating between hot and cold, and the evening air that rushed in was very chilly. Oblivious to the crazy mood the song had put him into, Xie Qingcheng reached over to close the window, which only irritated Yu more. What are you doing? Closing the window. But I just opened it. Aren't you cold? Yu was so affronted and overheated he could die, and the culprit was the man hovering over him right now, trying to shut the window. He had no choice but to lean as far back as possible so that Xie Qingcheng wouldn't touch his chest. Xie Qingcheng was clearly trying to avoid him, but the space in the car was limited. The distance between them had practically vanished. Yu glared at this man, his bloodthirsty desires and brutal urges rushing up over and over. He silently balled his hands into fists, his nails digging into his palms so hard that they almost drew blood. If he didn't do so, he knew he might have a sudden change of heart, discarding his calmness and ripping away his disguise to pin Xie Qingcheng down roughly. After all, the man was already leaning over the driver's seat. How could it be wrong to simply press him down a little? When he finally couldn't hold back any longer, he shoved Xie Qingcheng away, leveling a fierce, disdainful glare at him. If you're cold, can't you put on another layer? I'm only 20, and I think it's too hot. Xie Qingcheng didn't know what was wrong with him. Why did he suddenly lose his temper when everything had just been fine? But too much had happened tonight. He didn't have the energy to bicker with him. And he just didn't want to. The man simply gazed tranquilly at the boy for a while. Then, eventually, he spoke. Forget it. If there's nothing else, I'm getting out of the car. So, that's interesting. The man simply gazed tranquilly at the boy for a while. Like, just, okay. What was that about? Blue, did he spend his birthday alone again off screen? Oh, because he said I'm only 20. I forget now. Was it last stream when his birthday would have happened? Meatbun, how dare. Well, happy birthday whenever that happened. You. I think, because I'm... Yeah, I don't know when his birthday is supposed to be, but I feel like something was mentioned last stream, or maybe the one before. Yeah, now I don't know. Now I'm gonna have to go back and find that again. Forget it. If there's nothing else, I'm getting out of the car. Where do you think you're going? Calling a cab to go home. This made Hoyu so furious that he actually started to cry. Go ahead. Go ahead and call a cab. So sorry for wasting your time today. Shall I reimburse you for the fare? He actually reached into the storage compartment as he spoke, handing him a pile of 5 and 10 yuan notes. It was probably toll change that his driver had left behind. He stuffed the bills into Xie Qingcheng's hands. Go, he raged. Get out of my car right now. Can you just calm down? Xie Qingcheng asked. I can't. Xie Qingcheng didn't want to fight with him, so he put the money back into the compartment and tried to get out of the car. But even as he was yelling at Xie Qingcheng to leave, Hoyu had locked the passenger side door. Xie Qingcheng really had to hand it to him. He whipped around. Just what are you trying to do? Hoyu opened his mouth, chest heaving. He was obviously very worked up, but he didn't know how he was supposed to vent his emotions. Now that he'd vowed not to bother Xie Qingcheng anymore, he had no more excuses to defy him. When Xie Qingcheng asked him what he was really thinking, the first thing that came to mind was that he wanted to kiss him. But he wasn't allowed to. The black dragon howled forlornly. He didn't know how to deal with a treasure that was so precious to him, but which burned him so painfully. Finally, Hoyu flung open his door and got out of the car. He glared at Xie Qingcheng fiercely and obstinately through the window, eyes red, as if he wanted to show him just how tough he was. In the end, with all the toughness he could muster, he exclaimed, I've had enough of you. Just the sight of you pisses me off. Take the car. I'll call a cab for myself. Surely you can't have a problem with that? Xie Qingcheng blinked. By the time he came back to his senses, Hoyu had already turned to go. In the process of leaving, the brat actually picked up a rock from the ground and turned around to throw it, perhaps as a way to let off some steam. But he only ended up chipping off a small fortune's worth of paint from his 6 million yuan car. Of course, Xie Qingcheng wasn't going to take Hoyu's 6 million yuan car home. If he scratched or nicked it and couldn't afford to pay for the damages, that would be as good as letting Hoyu screw him over. He stepped out of the car, too. When he saw Xie Qingcheng step out of the car and into the frigid night wind, Hoyu was incensed. What are you getting out of the car for? He roared. I already said I'll take a cab home. Uh, it's so funny to me that they're arguing like this, and meanwhile, like, they just discovered that the prison lit on fire and their guy died and they couldn't talk to him. I'm like, there are more important things happening right now. Yu stood rooted to the spot, gnashing his teeth and stewing until his eyes turned red. In the end, he angrily rushed over to Xie Qingcheng and threw his coat over his head. Fine, fine, take this. Hurry up and leave. I can't stand the sight of you. What in the world did this unreasonable young man even want? Xie Qingcheng had to wonder. One moment, he was speaking in a perfectly civil manner. The next, he'd grabbed a rock and thrown it at him. Then he was leaving his own car for him. One moment, he was trying to take advantage of his weakness. The next, he was lending him his coat. Aren't you afraid that I'll sell your coat? Then sell it. Yu had intended to say this in a very lofty manner, but a chilly gust of the early spring wind blew, making him shudder and stammer as it drained the color from his lips. Shivering, Yu said in exasperation, Sell it. It's not like you haven't sold my things before. Xie Qingcheng looked at the young man trembling in front of him. Even though he thought the boy was being completely unreasonable, he also found him rather funny. He even pitied him a little. Surely this person was insane. Well, he really was insane. Xie Qingcheng took the coat, which still radiated Yu's warmth, and threw it back onto the boy. Put it on properly. Don't get sick and then come calling me. If I called you, would you pick up? Xie Qingcheng ignored him. He felt like this might never end if he responded. There were too many worries weighing on his mind right now for him to waste so much time bickering over a coat with Yu. Sorry, something just occurred to me, which is like, was it actually Yu's birthday already? Or was he just rounding his age up to 20? Because it says there's an early spring chill. And y'all said he was born in May? So I would think by the time it's May, it's not as chilly anymore, right? I don't know. Maybe May 26th. Yeah. I don't know. So I'm like, something isn't adding up. Once he'd given back the coat, he turned on his heel and left. Xie Qingcheng, Yu called after him. I asked you a question. This time, are you going to pick up when I call you? Xie Qingcheng. Xie Qingcheng turned a deaf ear to the dragon's roars. The frigid night had already frozen him half to death, and he was just about to wave down an empty taxi he spotted in the distance when he heard footsteps behind him. He turned around, only to run straight into Yu's face. Then, Yu grabbed him around the torso and hauled him back into the car. Motherfucker, let go of me, Xie Qingcheng ordered. This time, Yu was the one who was too angry to listen. Xie Qingcheng's strength and skill had originally been enough to deal with Yu, but his physical condition had deteriorated, and he was no longer a match for a young man at the peak of fitness. Yu forcibly stuffed him back into the car, slammed the door shut, and got into the driver's seat with a grim expression. Xie Qingcheng was so mad his head was beginning to ache. Sha Hong's sudden death was anxiety-inducing enough, and now Yu's shenanigans were making the vein in his temple throb even harder. As for Yu, Xie Qingcheng's indifference had driven him to anguish. With his emotions running wild and his ears buzzing blankly, he slammed on the gas and zoomed forward. He actually didn't even know where he wanted to take Xie Qingcheng. Acting on instinct, he parked the car in front of a budget hotel and dragged Xie Qingcheng inside with a stony expression. The receptionist inside was dozing off. Huh? Hey, what are you doing? Yu tossed his ID and wallet in front of the employee and said harshly, Get me a room. Xie Qingcheng jerked out of Yu's grip. Are you out of your mind? Yu didn't reply, only shooting him a bloodshot glance before turning his terrifying gaze on the receptionist. A room with a double bed. The receptionist had seen impatient gay guys before, but never like this. As he looked at the unsightly expression on the man standing next to this handsome youngster, he wondered, could this be sexual assault? Did he need to call the police? Any day now. The receptionist stammered, your ID, please. And we'll need to see the other gentleman's ID as well. No need to register his name, Yu replied. I'm staying alone. He's a guest. The receptionist said nothing, but the look in young Master He's eyes was too vicious, and the receptionist wasn't a particularly courageous man, so ultimately he checked Yu in and handed him the key card. Yu hauled Xie Qingcheng toward the room. The door opened with a beep. Yu pushed Xie Qingcheng into the dark room without turning on the lights, locking the door by feel with a crisp click. Now, the two of them were alone. In the dim entryway, Yu stared at Xie Qingcheng's face up close. He had never stayed in such a cheap, dirty little hotel before. He didn't even know why he'd stopped at such a lousy place as he sped down the road. He didn't even know what he was planning to do after he dragged Xie Qingcheng in here. To a normal person's thinking, what else was there to do after getting a room? Might as well do what he needed to do. In the depths of his heart, this was what Yu yearned for. He especially yearned for the version of Xie Qingcheng from New Year's Eve to come back, along with all the violence and passion he'd never shown before. He'd been at Xie Qingcheng's mercy, yet Xie Qingcheng had fully belonged to him. How could he have known it would end up being his last meal? Yu held Xie Qingcheng around his waist, staring at him with scarlet eyes as he pressed him against the coat rack in the hallway, the jut of his throat bobbing. Their moods that night were both reminiscent of New Year's Eve. Xia Hong's death had made their emotions turbulent. Last time, Xie Qingcheng's heart had been a mess, so Yu had managed to tempt him for the very first time. Perhaps because of these similarities, Yu had a faint hope that Xie Qingcheng might rely on him again while he was feeling down. But Xie Qingcheng didn't. Yu's anguish was unbearable, festering and swelling as they fought, until finally, he'd mindlessly hauled Xie Qingcheng to the cheapest hotel in the area and got a room. It was just too bad that getting a room was much easier than actually taking care of business. As Yu stared into Xie Qingcheng's coldly lucid eyes, he remembered the way Xie Qingcheng had looked the morning after, sitting by the window and calmly smoking a cigarette on New Year's Day. Back then, Xie Qingcheng must have been truly distraught, both pained and unnerved by what they'd done. Yu's pathological mindset still contained one thread of rationality that pulled his body back under control like a marionette string, keeping him from acting on impulse and roughly overpowering Xie Qingcheng. He'd already gotten the room. It was too hard to stomach the thought of not doing anything at all. However, if he actually did do anything, he would be bullying his only kin and injuring him in both body and spirit. Yu stood there, waging war against himself, until finally he headbutted the wall next to Xie Qingcheng in anger, despondently mashing his forehead against the boards with his eyes closed. Xie Qingcheng was silent. In this position, Yu's body pressed down on his own, the youth's hand gripping his wrist around that delicate tattoo. To an outsider, their silhouettes would have looked like they were overlapping in the entryway, as if they were sharing a sorrowful, intimate kiss. But Xie Qingcheng knew that Yu hadn't kissed him. Yu was simply pressing his head against the wall next to him, very close to the crook of his neck. He could distinctly feel Yu's heated breaths brushing over his skin. After a long while, Yu suddenly straightened up. Fury, indignation, and desire reddened his eyes until they were suffused with a rosy glow. "Forget it," Yu rasped. "We won't do anything. I'm not doing anything. I'm leaving. You'd better not stop me." Xie Qingcheng was thoroughly baffled. "No one's stopping you." Yu looked like Xie Qingcheng had kicked him. His face turned ashen with fury, and he even stuttered slightly. "Well, goodbye then." Since Xie Qingcheng's emotional CPU was the Windows 98 Clueless Straight Guy edition, he didn't get Yu's meaning at all. That's amazing. Not Windows 98. Yu turned and walked away. If he lingered any longer, he feared he might really end up hurting his kin. His kin's attitude might have been ice cold, but his every movement fanned the flames in Hoyu's heart. He wanted so badly to fall into another blissful dream with him, so he had no choice but to leave. Xie Jingzhong was right. Humans were different from animals, because humans could control themselves. Once Hoyu left him in the room by himself, Xie Jingzhong found that the boy's actions had muddled his usually clear mind. He couldn't make heads or tails of any part of this farce. His tall figure was still leaning against the wall, his peach blossom eyes bewildered, lacking their usual sharpness. After a moment, he took a pack of smokes out of his pocket, biting down on the filter and lighting the last cigarette with practiced movements. As he exhaled a breath of smoke, he suddenly realized that he was still wearing Hoyu's coat. He didn't like wearing other people's clothes. I can't wait for that to change. The moment when Xie Jingzhong likes wearing Hoyu's clothing. That's going to be a moment. He didn't like wearing other people's clothes, and he didn't want Hoyu to be frozen stiff in the cold winter night either. Oh, really? Thus, as soon as he came back to his senses, he ran out after him. Hoyu was checking out at the front desk. The receptionist was looking at Hoyu with an undisguised subtlety in his gaze. How long had it been? Not even 15 minutes in total. And after subtracting the time it took to undress, wash up, and dress again, not even 3 minutes remained, little brother. This youngster's aura was pretty intimidating, both handsome and spirited, but he'd only lasted 3 minutes in the end. So when he saw Xie Jingzhong sweep in with a frozen overlook on his face, the receptionist wasn't surprised at all. Who could have possibly gotten any pleasure out of that? Your coat, said Xie Jingzhong. Hoyu signed the forms and turned away without paying any mind. Xie Jingzhong had no choice but to walk over and drape the coat over the boy's shoulders. Upon seeing this thoroughly paternal gesture, the budget hotel receptionist had the same thought as the Sky Night Club receptionist. Astonished, the young man behind the counter looked at Hoyu, and then at Xie Jingzhong, thinking that his previous assumption had been wrong. The one who'd only lasted 3 minutes probably wasn't the younger guy, but rather the handsome man who was chasing after him. Now the story in the young receptionist's head changed completely. This older uncle was probably the pretty college boy's sugar daddy, and because he hadn't managed to make the experience enjoyable enough, the boy left in a fit, like a peeved concubine. Now the handsome uncle was trailing behind his concubine, draping a coat over his shoulders. Hoyu turned to glare at Xie Jingzhong. Probably because he was really furious, his tone was positively noxious. Uncle, how long are you planning to drag things out with me because of a coat? Xie Jingzhong didn't even care that it was the first time Hoyu had called him uncle. He took a silent drag of his cigarette. Then, probably because he saw no point in speaking with this cantankerous concubine, he walked up to the front desk and said, I'll pay the bill. The receptionist shot a look of deep reproval at this man. He hadn't just strung a university student along, he even made him foot the bill. That young man already paid it. Thoroughly irritated, Xie Jingzhong turned around to face Hoyu. Speaking around the cigarette between his teeth, his words were impassive yet somewhat garbled. Open your Alipay. I'll transfer you the money. Xie Jingzhong had provoked Hoyu to his limit. He cursed under his breath, unable to bear it any longer. He suddenly grabbed Xie Jingzhong and pulled him outside, his movements just as rough as when they arrived. The two of them had spent the whole day bickering back and forth, from the alleyway to the car, from the car to the budget hotel. Then all they did was fight in the hotel, only to end up back in the car again. Only a couple of lunatics could have pulled this off. Hoyu brusquely shoved Xie Jingzhong into the spacious back seat of the Cullinan and climbed on top of him with bloodshot eyes. Gripping Xie Jingzhong's wrist with one hand, he reached up with the other to brush through a few strands of loose hair on Xie Jingzhong's temple, caressing his broad forehead and elegant brows. Between the intensity of his ardor and the desperation with which he was suppressing it. His hand trembled slightly. Beneath the car's dim, ambient lighting, their eyes met at close range. Hoyu's gaze was slack and infatuated, seemingly bewitched, as he stared into the depths of Xie Qingchung's peach blossom eyes. The Cullinan's soundproofing was so good that they couldn't hear anything at all from outside. That sounds ominous. What are they supposed to hear from outside? All that echoed in their ears were the sounds of their breaths and heartbeats. Hoyu stroked Xie Qingchung's brow and forehead again and again, as though cupping handfuls of sweet spring water for the beast in his heart that was dying of thirst. But it was far from enough. So far from enough. The closer Hoyu drew to him, the hotter he felt. He was his agar, his opium poppy. He was both his poison and his antidote. Looking down at the man underneath him, he couldn't help but remember the passion this man had unleashed upon him on New Year's Eve. Even if that kind of passion was more like a type of self-destruction. In this kind of atmosphere, Xie Qingchung found for the first time that he couldn't meet Hoyu's eyes. He turned his face away. For the first time. Interesting. It's the sweet sound of a recorder. Blue. That very next second, Hoyu grabbed his face, forcing him to turn and look at him again. Although Xie Qingchung's gaze was cold, he discovered a trace of turbulence amid that coldness. The turbulence made Hoyu's heart swell and shudder in excitement. With hot blood coursing through his body, he silently gazed into Xie Qingchung's eyes for a few seconds, his breathing gradually becoming labored and urgent. Then he suddenly buried his hands in Xie Qingchung's dark hair, cradling his head. With lowered lashes, he leaned down to kiss him. Alright, final chapter for the day. And of course we're going overtime, because it's a long one. By the way, that ended on a... He leaned down to kiss him... dash. So, there was an interruption. So we are on page 335 for chapter 111, which is called We Found a Clue. No. No, 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 no. No, hold on. Hold on. Yes, I'm here right with you, Blue. I saw it and I was like, every night in my dreams, I see you, I feel you. That is how I know you. In the moment before their lips met, Hoyu's phone rang. It's his ringtone now. And whoever's calling him can't be Xie Qingchung. So it's not just his ringtone for Xie Qingchung, it's his ringtone for, like, everybody. Apparently. Celine Dion's crisp voice yanked Hoyu out of the haze of desire. The moment the music shattered that bewitchingly suggestive atmosphere, his mind raced back to everything that had happened before. He suddenly sat up, his chest heaving as though it had been scalded, and tore his gaze away from Xie Qingchung's handsome face. Ahem. I need to take this call. Xie Qingchung also sat up in a state of disarray. Behind his messy bangs, his eyes and brows were frosty. Henry, top 10 sentences. You're right. Oh my god. The craziest thing to read in a Danmei novel. Hoyu wasn't the only one who'd been brought to his senses by the ringtone. After seeing the way Hoyu had just looked at him, Xie Qingchung could barely pull himself back together. Xie Qingchung's heart hadn't necessarily softened. Rather, he felt like there was something wrong with Hoyu. When the boy fixed his gaze upon him, there was something strange in his expression. He'd felt that if he said another word in that moment, Hoyu might cease to live right then and there. No, he was probably overthinking it. Xie Qingchung. The look in Hoyu's eyes was like a baby bird's. Like Xie Qingcheng was the only person in the world he could depend upon. A very long time ago, Xie Shui had looked at Xie Qingcheng like this. She was the only person he'd ever seen with that expression. But Hoyu wasn't like Xie Shui. He could get anything he wanted. How could there be anyone that a kid with his abilities couldn't live without? How had Xie Qingcheng almost misunderstood? He'd nearly been bewitched by this... He'd nearly been bewitched by this guy again. Fucking hell. It was... I was tripping over my words, and I was so close to saying he'd nearly been bewitched by this gay again. Close enough. But also, like, okay, so he was bewitched by him before, so you admit it. I mean, we knew that, but, you know. Deeply vexed, Xie Qingcheng reached for a cigarette, but after rummaging fruitlessly at length, he finally remembered that he'd just smoked the last one. Okay, got it. He Yu was still on the phone, murmuring an agreement from time to time. Xie Qingcheng decided that he needed to get out of the car. Tonight had just been too fucking absurd for him. Thank goodness for that phone call. Because if he and He Yu ended up having sex in this car today, he'd never be able to live it down. Besides, behaving like that would be completely irresponsible toward both He Yu and himself. He undid his seatbelt, preparing to leave. But He Yu suddenly held him back. He was still solemnly listening to the person on the phone, brow furrowed, and he shook his head to indicate that Xie Qingcheng shouldn't move. Although He Yu's voice was still a bit hoarse with desire, his tone was very serious and calm. An outsider would have never guessed that he'd been planning to undress his former psychiatrist, shove him into the back seat of his car to kiss him ardently, and fuck this man who was old enough to be his uncle. A textbook example of a beast in human clothing. Sure, no problem. I'll be right there. After hanging up, He Yu turned to Xie Qingcheng. Come to Baoshan Nursing Home with me. There's someone who wants to see us. Who? Asked Xie Qingcheng. I don't know if you still remember him, He Yu said. Zhuang Jichuang. The old man you met on your matchmaking date with that Bai girl. Baoshan Nursing Home was owned by the He family, but He Jiwei had ceded all control to He Yu, letting He Yu manage the business on his own. God, sometimes I forget, like, what kind of stuff He Yu is getting up to when there's not, you know, important plot points going on. Henry, they're just going to the nursing home to drop off Xie Qingcheng. He is over 30 after all. I was wondering when he would be back. And yet, I'm still surprised. Like, okay. I need to know how he's relevant to the story. I'm so curious now. After the fire at Chung Kong Psychiatric Hospital, He Yu had arranged for the homeless, mentally ill Zhuang Jiqiang to be transferred to this nursing home for his care. Since then, so much time had passed in the blink of an eye. The facility's head nurse had just called to tell He Yu that Zhuang Jiqiang's condition had taken a turn for the worse over the past couple of days. But as the old man neared the end of his life, he'd had a flash of terminal lucidity. His mind had suddenly become very clear. He remembered how he'd been rescued and brought to the nursing home, and he said that he wanted to meet with the young people responsible. When He Yu and Xie Qingcheng made it to Baoshan Nursing Home, Zhuang Jiqiang was lying back in an elevated hospital bed with his eyes partially closed, seeming to be half asleep. Sir, the nurse called softly, our President He and Dr. Xie are here. The old man slowly surfaced from his shallow sleep, his gaze focusing on the two people before him. Ah, it's you guys. Zhuang Jiqiang's chest was huffing and puffing like an old radiator, sending out the last bit of his human vitality. It's you guys. Yeah, I see that too. Blue, also the girl definitely coming back too. I would bet on it. He tried to sit up in his bed, but He Yu stopped him. Sir, you don't have to get up. The old man's lips trembled, and every breath he took was laborious. There seemed to be many things he wanted to say to them, but before he could get a single word out, his eyes filled with hot tears that began to roll down his face. Have I inconvenienced you two? Not at all, He Yu said. We happened to be out taking care of some things. We hadn't gone to sleep yet. Zhuang Jiqiang seemed to feel slightly relieved. He wiped away his tears and then gripped He Yu's hand tightly. I know the end is near. I asked you both to come because I wanted to say thank you. I came to Huzhou many times while I was drifting around for all those years. I don't think I've ever done anything to be ashamed of. But for some reason, times got so hard as I grew old. My heart hurt so badly. At this point, the old man had to take a deep breath. He paused to dab away his tears. It was so painful. If I hadn't met you kind-hearted people, I probably wouldn't even have a place to rest in the end. I probably would have died on the side of the road or under a pavilion. No one would have found my body for days. As he spoke, Zhuang Jiqiang became more and more dejected and agitated. He looked like he wanted to climb out of his bed and prostrate himself before the people who had finally taken him in. He Yu reached out to hold him back and helped him lie down again, just as Xie Qingcheng did the same thing. Zhuang Jiqiang's mind was much clearer than before. His death must be close. His whole life had been full of hardship until the very end, when he received this elusive kindness. His honest character compelled him to thank them personally, as though this was the only way he could peacefully depart from the world. Xie Qingcheng and He Yu sat with him for quite a while. What about that girl? He asked, when he'd calmed down. He was referring to Xie Shui. At that moment, Xie Shui lay in another private hospital being treated to slow the progression of a rare illness. She's busy with work and not in Huzhou right now, said Xie Qingcheng. If there's anything you want to say to her, you can tell me. I'll pass it on. I don't dare trouble you. Zhuang Jiqiang coughed, slowly shaking his head. I really don't dare trouble you anymore. His cloudy eyes looked up at the ceiling. I just wanted to ask you, please thank her for me, the next time you see her. Thank that girl for me. What's her name? Her name is Xie Shui. Xie Shui. It was as though a ray of light shone through the old man's hazy eyes, his fading irises glimmering with scattered brilliance. Oh, so as it turns out, her name is Xue too. This is really... Hearing this, He Yu's heart quivered. Sir, when we met you, you said you have a daughter, and that you came to Huzhou to look for her, He Yu began. But the people from Homeless Services told us that they couldn't find a daughter from your hometown when they looked into it. We thought you might have been imagining things. What? I wasn't imagining things. The old man grew agitated again. How could you be a figment of my imagination? Her name was Zhao Shui. But of course you wouldn't be able to find her because she's not my daughter by blood. She's my adopted daughter. Interesting. Zhuang Jiqiang lay back on the bed. Then, he told them some things from his past they hadn't known about. The place where Zhuang Jiqiang had lived was very poor, both economically and spiritually. Because its location was so remote and the soil was ill-suited to farming, it became a breeding ground for all sorts of preposterous things. It was home to many ignorant practices, like families selling their sons and daughters, child brides becoming young mothers, and even ghost marriages. Not the ghost marriages. Zhuang Jiqiang's mother had been a victim of these traditions. She was sold to Zhuang Jiqiang's father when she was 14, and endured physical abuse at the hands of that useless man. When the now elderly Mr. Zhuang was a child, he saw his bruised and battered mother wiping away her tears every day. Those memories had a lasting impact on his young heart. After Zhuang Jiqiang's parents passed away, he kept to himself and didn't interact much with the idle, crude men in his village. The others all saw him as an eccentric. He never married, but to the villagers, marriage amounted to selling off their daughters to provide for their sons. They demanded unreasonably large betrothal gifts before holding an absurd, hideous ceremony to deliver the poor girl into the bed of a man she might not even like. Throughout this process, she was supposed to weep her heart out and endure the guests' unctuous and irresponsible harassment. Zhuang Jichang didn't have much money, and he wasn't willing to treat a girl like that. In this uncivilized village, he was still able to live with a clear conscience, spending his whole life as a bachelor. But Zhuang Jichang did have someone who was dear to him, a pretty, clever young girl from the neighboring village named Zhao Xue. One day, when Zhuang Jichang was returning home after finishing his work in the fields, he heard whimpering from a pile of grass behind his house. At first, he thought that a weasel was making a racket back there, so he headed over with a club in hand, only to discover that it was a girl. That was how he first met Zhao Xue. Yeah, it was Henry. You said if it's some crazy shit about Xie Xue and Zhao Xue being the same person, but that doesn't make sense age-wise. Yeah. I don't... no. Blue, you're saying the old woman, on the other hand. Yeah, I don't know. Probably because of Zhuang Jichang's righteous air. Once the girl had recovered from her hesitation and fright, she timidly followed Zhuang Jichang into his home. After anxiously gulping down some hot water covered in an oily film, she fell to her knees and began to bawl. She said, "Uncle, please save me. Save me. I don't want to get married." Even though Zhuang Jichang was used to the vulgar traditions of this desolate place, he was still shocked by how young Zhao Xue was. She was scarcely an adolescent. Even in this village, it was rare to marry off such a young girl. When Zhuang Jichang carefully inquired about her circumstances and learned the whole story, he was so livid that his scalp went numb. Zhao Xue was from the Zhao family village a few kilometers away. She was the only daughter in her family, with 3 half-brothers born to her mother and stepfather. Her stepfather was a beast of a man who harbored illicit designs on her. Although her mother was frail, she still tried to protect Zhao Xue when her stepfather drunkenly attempted to sexually assault the girl. For this, her stepfather beat her mother severely, and her mother passed away not long afterward. Domestic violence against women was so commonplace in this wretched village that no one even raised an eyebrow. As long as she hadn't been beaten to death on the spot, it was very difficult to prove that her abominable husband was the murderer. After her mother was buried, Zhao Xue was forced to stop going to school so that she could stay home and cook for her stepfather and 3 older brothers. Because of his wife's death, her stepfather didn't dare assault her at first. However, shortly thereafter, a wealthy family offered a very generous betrothal gift to buy Zhao Xue, and her stepfather gladly agreed to their request. I'm so upset I don't know how to speak. The sum they offered was so large that it would take him several years to squander away. So, of course, he didn't care that the son of that wealthy family had vitiligo and was mentally ill. What did that have to do with him? He wasn't the one being married off. The news gave Zhao Xue such a horrible fright that she ran away from home that very night. She left the Zhao family village, scrambled over a hill, and escaped to the neighboring Zhuang family village. After Zhuang Jichang finished listening to her story, he smoked his pipe in silence for a long while. As he looked at the girl kneeling before him, he made up his mind. He said to Zhao Xue, "Miss, how about this? If you feel safe here, you can stay with me for a night. Tomorrow I'll bring you into town. There's a new Hope Elementary School there. They take boarding students. We can try to explain your situation to the principal, and if you're accepted, you don't have to go back. You can stay in the county seat, and you don't need to ever return to that awful place. Are you willing to trust me?" Yeah, Henry, correct. That's the condition where you you like slowly lose melanin, and so you get like very light patches. I'm sure in a village like this, it's considered like a big deal. Unfortunately. Zhao Shui was simultaneously very unlucky and very lucky. It was unlucky that she'd been born into such an awful family, but it was lucky that she met Zhuang Jichang. The principal of Hope Elementary School was a very kind woman. She didn't just take in this new student. She also protected her unfalteringly for many years afterward. For most of the year, Zhao Shui lived at school with the principal. During vacations, she would make the car ride back to the Zhuang family village to help Zhuang Jichang with farming and other chores. Zhao Shui saw Lao Zhuang as her father, and when she called him her old man, Zhuang Jichang would smile from ear to ear. But not many people met Zhao Shui, and even fewer knew that Zhuang Jichang treated her like his own daughter. After all, Zhao Shui was a runaway from the neighboring village, and Zhuang Jichang didn't want her life to be disrupted again. The days passed like that as Zhao Shui advanced from elementary school to middle school, and then to high school. Zhao Shui made good on the kindness that Zhuang Jichang and the principal had shown to her. With exceptional marks, she was accepted into a newly built high school in the county seat. This school was also a charitable project, but its infrastructure and resources were considerably better than most of the schools built through Project Hope. The school even had a variety of arts training programs to provide more opportunities for children from the mountains to move into the prospering city. Later, she told me that she was selected as an arts candidate, Zhuang Jichang recalled. I didn't know what an arts candidate was, so she explained it to me. She wanted to be a model or a celebrity on TV one day, so she needed to take specialized classes in Huzhou. When the old man reached this point in his story, he sorrowfully dabbed at his eyes with a tissue. What was the woman's backstory who was in Chungkong Psychiatric Hospital, you mean? Because I don't remember, but now I would be curious to look into that again. I was very happy at the time, he said in a choked-up voice. Huzhou is a big city, I thought, and not many people got the chance to establish themselves there. But my daughter could. My daughter was amazing. Zhuang Jichang paused before suddenly breaking down into loud sobs. But I never saw her again. After she came here, it was like she vanished. I asked the school, but they didn't know anything. I went to the address they gave me, but there was nothing there. She had already moved. I couldn't find her. I couldn't find her. The old man couldn't stop weeping. I'm not crazy. I really do have a daughter. I haven't seen her in so many years. I miss her. Even on my deathbed, I still can't bear to let her go. Where did she go? Does she remember this old man? Tears fell one after another onto the blankets. He Yu and Xie Qingcheng stayed quietly by his side, lending their company to this elder who was weeping like a child. Perhaps because the sight was too pitiful, He Yu spoke up even though he knew the chances were slim. Uncle, let me try to help. Do you have any information about Zhao Shui's last whereabouts? For example, do you know who invited her to come to Huzhou? I asked the school, but they said it was too long ago and they didn't have the records anymore. After Zhao Shui came to Huzhou, did she contact you? Only at first, Zhuang Jichang recalled. At first, she would call me in good spirits, but at the time, she only told me that Huzhou was very beautiful and that she saw many things she'd only seen on TV before. She didn't talk about much else. Because Secretary Wang had her sign an NDA. He Yu's heart skipped a beat. Even though there were countless people in the world with the surname Wang, in the context of arts training programs, mysterious disappearances, and criminal activities, he immediately thought of one person. He asked Zhuang Jichang, did Zhao Shui ever tell you the full name of that Secretary Wang? She did, but I didn't pay particular attention to it at the time. I can't remember anymore. I think it was Wang something Kong. It was like a sudden clap of thunder sounded. He Yu and Xie Qingcheng turned to one another, each seeing his own unsightly expression in the other man's eyes. Wang Jiankong, the first victim in the Huzhou Broadcasting Tower murders. Zhao Xue's disappearance was related to them. Neither of them could have expected it, but this was a clue for their investigation of the Chungkong and Broadcasting Tower cases. That's the end of the chapter. That's where we stop for today. Oh. Well, when we come back on Wednesday, we will be on chapter 112, which is called I Held You. Thank you, Meat Bun, for that chapter title. Who knows what else is going to happen in that chapter. But this is interesting. I had some, like, crazy thought, which is, like, what if somehow... Don't ask me how this all would have happened. But what if somehow, like, Zhao Xue was actually Xie Xue's, like, real mother... And somehow she got adopted or taken in by the Xies. Because if I recall, Zhuang Jichang did say that Xie Xue looked like his daughter. So part of me still thinks, what if there's a relation there somehow? Oh, but she and Xie... Oh, that's right, duh. She and Xie Qingcheng look similar, so that would not be... Okay, never mind. Unless, even crazier possibility is if, like, both of them, their mother is actually Zhao Xue somehow. But I yeah. That's... Okay, well... Yeah, I don't know. That's a thought, but I'm torn between, like, that's ridiculous. Meat Bun just wants us to, like, think that. And then, like, well, what if it's a possibility? I don't know. I'm sure it'll be a while before we, like, find out a lot more details on that particular part of the story. I'm just very curious to find out what happened to Zhao Xue. So, thank y'all for being here in the stream today. Thank you for staying extra long. And we will see what happens next on Wednesday. Bye.